Well, guys, here we are. It's Valentine's Day 2023, and US crypto policy is not being very romantic or alluring with us. US crypto policy is like a cruel mistress, a tree that bears no fruit and provides no shade. They seem to be after offerings, stablecoins, custodial staking, and even Bitcoin at this point for its ESG crimes. This is not an Olympic 100-meter race where the winner will be adorned in gold and patriotically draped in the flag of a grateful nation. This is a long-term game of survival where the prize is simply to continue to be relevant. This is one case where the relative obscurity of Cardano may be to our advantage. We may end up as the last person standing in a field littered with the burning carcasses of our biggest competitors. Ready? Let's go. Today, we are going to discuss all of our competitors seemingly being simultaneously under siege, so many S's, Bitcoin being attacked full force on energy consumption, Paxos giving up in the face of SEC threat, Circle allegedly narking on Binance, and the extremely conflicting contingent staking issue in Cardano. If your biggest complaint about this guy's choices is that his hoodie seems to be at least 15 years out of style, or if you're finding value in these videos each weekday, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. I know you're thinking, nothing says Valentine's Day like burn the bodies. But let's face it, crypto's been under siege for a long time, and we've got some corpses to deal with. Offerings, long dead. Stable coins, fiat-backed stable coins at least, maybe all walking dead. Custodial staking, probably on death's doorstep. And even Bitcoin at this point is in trouble over its energy usage. It's been in trouble for a while, but it seems like that is seriously ramping up right now. We talk a lot about Ethereum on this channel because Cardano is a Gen 3 smart contract blockchain. And so we talk about our biggest competitor in that space, which is Ethereum. We talk a little bit less about Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a slightly different case. There was a time when Bitcoin seemed unassailable. It seemed like there was nothing bad you could say about Bitcoin that wouldn't apply to the rest of the crypto space. Certainly, if you're going to criticize the crypto space, Bitcoin seemed like it would be the least susceptible to those criticisms. But times have changed. Do you remember Kumar from Harold and Kumar? Just seemed like a nice guy who wanted to eat some White Castle. That is no longer the case in 2023 if you're in crypto. Here's a post that says, I thought this was a joke at first, but it's real. Truly shameful and pathetic anti-Bitcoin propaganda from Bloomberg. So here's a whole video just about Bitcoin. So here we have Kumar, and he's saying, so what makes cryptocurrency, his name's Kal Penn, by the way, Kal Penn, the actor. I finally remember him as Kumar of Harold and Kumar because it was a great movie at the time. So Kal Penn says, so what makes cryptocurrency such an energy hog? And then he goes on to tell you, well, it comes down to 3 words, proof of work. And then he goes on to tell you all about proof of work and how it has a massive carbon footprint. He is all about how Bitcoin is no good because of proof of work. The carbon footprint is simply too big. It's an ESG crime. He doesn't say it's an ESG crime, but that's basically what they're implying. They're like, hey, the new law is don't violate the ESG stuff, and Bitcoin, you're a big violator. He mentions that Ethereum moved from proof of work to proof of stake. Why can't Bitcoin move to proof of stake? I think the people making videos like this know that there's no way the Bitcoin maximalists on any kind of a short timeline would ever agree to Bitcoin becoming a proof of stake protocol. So, of course, they have to attack all of the big, large cap cryptocurrencies, starting with Bitcoin and Ethereum. And they have a bunch of different tactics. They're sort of using different tactics to attack each one. So with Bitcoin, it's this great ESG crime of having too big a carbon footprint. With Ethereum, it's like, oh, staking? We don't like staking. That seems like a security, as we've seen in the last week. And so far, it's just been an attack on centralized exchanges and the way they do custodial staking. But we're sort of waiting for the other foot to fall. It's like all of a sudden, it's like, oh wait, now we think maybe normal Ethereum stake pools, normal Ethereum validators, we think that's actually pretty close to what the centralized exchanges were doing. We think this is also a security. That foot could also fall. Ripple has been in litigation with the SEC forever. Binance USD, the stablecoin, we found out just yesterday, it's in trouble with the SEC. We don't know what other stablecoins in the top 10 are going to be in trouble with the SEC. Will it be USDC next? USDC is issued by Circle, but the founding entity in USDC was an entity called Center. And Center was sort of co-founded by both Circle and Coinbase. If you weren't aware that Coinbase was so tightly interwoven with USDC, here's the current website for Center. Center, the very first page, says founding members, Circle and Coinbase. We come down here, they say an independent members-based consortium. We began by launching USDC. So there you go. The entity that launched USDC has among its founding members Circle and Coinbase. So in a lot of the recent coverage of the Paxos BUSD Wells notice from the SEC, you see rumors, I'll put it this way, you see rumors floating around that basically ask the question, is Circle next? But what they don't tell you is USDC is not really just Circle. We've got this entity Center, and Center was really Circle and Coinbase. At least they were among its founding members. So if you think about it, we've got Kraken, who is already settling with the SEC. We've got Binance, who's obviously in the regulatory crosshairs. I mean, BUSD, their stablecoin, their Binance branded stablecoin. We can say that Paxos was the issuer, but it's the Binance USD stablecoin. It's already under attack. If we have an attack on USDC as well, people might try to say that's just Circle, but it's actually Circle and Coinbase. Who's left after we've taken out Kraken, Binance, Coinbase, custodial staking as a thing? If Bitcoin is under attack for its environmental impact through its energy use and carbon footprint, if they're recruiting celebrities to tell you about the massive, so-called massive carbon footprint of Bitcoin. And before everybody gets all up in arms, I know, there's a whole body of Bitcoin maximalist sort of literature on the carbon offsets and how we can use, geothermal power or, whatever it is. They've got all kinds of arguments about how not only is Bitcoin not a negative environmental impact, but it's actually good because it'll subsidize the creation of sustainable energy, that kind of thing. I know I've seen the literature. I understand that argument, but I don't think the policymakers today are buying into that. In fact, I think they don't even care. I think the agenda is attack all of crypto. And if you're going to attack all of crypto, if that's your agenda, you're going to start with the biggest players. You're going to start with the stable coins that are very convenient for DeFi. And DeFi is a huge part of Ethereum. You might also attack custodial staking. Custodial staking seems to be a big part of the whole EVM world. You're going to attack Bitcoin however you can. And the best way to attack Bitcoin right now is based on the ESG crime of having too big a carbon footprint. you've already attacked offerings. We already went through the 2017 ICO craze and the subsequent regulatory fallout. You might attack all of these things simultaneously. If your goal is to strangle crypto, will it be successful? We don't know yet. We don't know what's going to happen. But what's clear is that the relative obscurity of Cardano, and I say that on a very comparative basis, because compared to the number 250 cryptocurrency, Cardano is gigantic. It's enormous. But among the largest capped cryptocurrency ecosystems, Cardano manages to remain out of the spotlight, which is, I don't want to use the trite expression, but it's a gift and a curse. It's a curse in terms of adoption, a gift in terms of staying out of the regulatory radar. We currently find ourselves in this position where if the regulators and the policymakers and the legislators, the portion of them that are against crypto, which is right now in this post FTX era, it's pretty substantial. We have a substantial number of enemies among the people making policy for crypto, especially in North America. If those people are successful, Cardano, I mean, it's not too big a stretch to say we find ourselves in a field littered with the carcasses of our competitors. And the only thing left to do is burn the bodies. Of course, it's obvious. As soon, if that were to happen, if our competitors were to lose a lot of relevance because of regulatory attack, if it became very impractical to use those blockchains to the same extent they're being used today, of course, the same people are going to turn their attention to the next biggest blockchain. If that were Cardano, they would turn their attention to Cardano. So I'm not saying that Cardano is going to see the demise of its competitors and suddenly be home free. Of course, if that were to happen, I'm not even saying that's going to happen, but things are definitely trending in a negative direction for all the largest cap cryptocurrencies. In the case of Cardano, we seem to have done a little bit of extra regulatory planning, a little bit of extra optimization, a little bit better positioning. We don't have this crazy custodial staking thing. We're not completely defined by the DeFi thing, which is so reliant on the stablecoin thing. We don't have this massive, in the words of the critics, massive carbon footprint due to the proof of work. Cardano is in an excellent place to resist these regulatory policy attacks. But even if we do resist all these attacks, of course, they'll find some new way. The people who truly want the demise of all crypto, to strangle crypto in the cradle, of course, they'll find some way to attack Cardano, and we wouldn't be immune to whatever they come up with. But man, it's hard to debate that Cardano seems to be in a very, very good position right now compared to virtually all the other large cap cryptocurrencies. So what happens when the SEC goes after a crypto project? They fight, right? It's a giant war. Sometimes. But sometimes they have to surrender. Here we see the aftermath of the Wells notice to Paxos about Binance USD. Paxos responded this morning. Paxos announced it will halt mining BUSD, and they were careful to give everybody some details, saying existing BUSD tokens are fully backed and redeemable through Paxos Trust Company through at least February 2024. But in the meantime, they are halting the issuance of new BUSD. So how exactly does a crypto project get on the radar of regulators? Well, according to this article from Bloomberg, reprinted by Yahoo Finance, apparently by their competitors narking on them. This article is called Stablecoin Issuer Circle Warned New York Regulator About Rival Binance's Token. The article says Circle, which operates the USDC stablecoin and shares a regulator with Binance branded stablecoin firm Paxos, alerted the watchdog, that would be the New York State Department of Financial Services, alerted the watchdog last August to issues its team had surfaced in blockchain data that showed Binance did not store enough crypto in reserve to support tokens it had issued, according to a person familiar with the matter. So it turns out that the regulators don't even need to notice this on our own. They have convinced us to actually turn on each other. Obviously, we haven't addressed the one thing that most of Cardano Twitter, at least, Cardano Twitter, the one thing that most of Cardano Twitter has been talking about for the last couple of days. So it all this has been an ongoing discussion, low key, for a while, but it suddenly reached this huge fever pitch over the last couple of days, and it was sort of precipitated by this post. And I don't think there's anything wrong with this post. I think it's perfectly reasonable. But this is kind of the spark that kind of lit this whole thing. It wasn't even necessarily this post, but more the response to this post. Well, you'll see what I mean. So this post says, you may not want to use a chain that has KYC support on the L1, but the rest of mass adoption will. So this was obviously a response to the recent commentary that Charles provided in a video that we covered on this channel about contingent staking. Contingent staking is this idea that normally in a business anywhere on earth, the proprietor of that business can refuse business. So, not everywhere, but in a lot of places, if you are a merchant, you could refuse to sell something to someone. If you run a restaurant, you could refuse to serve someone. If you don't like, something about the transaction that they're proposing, you could say, no, I'll pass on that transaction. I'd rather, do other transactions. And Charles pointed this out in his video, and he said, hey, in Cardano staking, we have this thing where it's sort of push only. The delegators can delegate to whatever pool they want, and the SPOs, the stake pool operators, kind of have no say in it. If you delegate to a stake pool, the stake pool can't refuse that delegation, even if that delegation would push the stake pool over the saturation limit. We've seen this happen to certain stake pools. Certain stake pools would get a gigantic, massive delegation that pushed them over the saturation threshold, and then everybody in the stake pool is earning less in delegation rewards than they should. So of course, people flee this stake pool, and this begins to form a kind of attack. If you're a whale who has a lot of ADA, you could basically destroy a stake pool, at least over a certain timeline, maybe a short one, maybe a medium term one, but over some timeline, you could destroy that stake pool because no delegator is going to want to stake to a stake pool if they're earning less than they should because it's oversaturated. They're going to flee that stake pool if it's oversaturated. So you could kind of force all the normal delegators away with your giant delegation attack in this case. And then later on, you could withdraw your giant whale delegation and the stake pool is left with nothing. So the obvious solution to all this problem is, hey, we just make it so that the stake pool also has to consent to the delegation. The problem with this is, and this has been very vocally pointed out, is that the second you allow the stake pools to say who can and can't delegate to the stake pool, then regulators could come along and say, oh, it's not permissionless anymore. So if it's not permissionless, if the stake pool has to give its permission, then that means you guys can be forced to KYC all of your delegators. And of course, this is a big problem for a lot of people who are aligned with the sort of permissionlessness and the sort of freedom ethos that's so prevalent in crypto. So here was the response to that original post. It says, with crypto people like this, who needs the feds? Cardano going full clown mode. And I think when you see this post, you're going to know why this got people a little riled up. At this point, people got riled up. I think this original post, pretty reasonable. This one, this is the kind of post that you can tell is going to get people a little bit riled up. And in fact, one of the people who responded to it was Charles. Charles said apparently people are having difficulty understanding that a decentralized protocol will have users who write software for their specific needs, regulated and unregulated. And it's at this point that I can say I can sort of see both sides of this. I can understand why somebody aligned with the original crypto ethos would say, nope, the delegation to validators, to stake pools, needs to be permissionless so that stake pools are never forced to do this KYC AML stuff that all of us in crypto have been pretty resistant to all these years. But I can also understand somebody coming from the position of Charles saying, hey, we're trying to create a blockchain for a lot of different use cases, for a lot of different economic actors to come in and use this as an economic operating system. And some of them are going to be traditional world parties, or they're going to be interacting with parties from the traditional world, and they're going to need to comply with the laws of the land that they're in. We can't just say, we'll never do KYC, even if that means we never get to interact with any of the traditional world. That could cap our growth. I understand both sides of that. I totally understand the original ethos people. I also understand the people who are like, hey, if we ever want the mainstream to come over, we're going to have to comply with the law of the land. And the law of the land in most of the developed world involves KYC because we don't want to allow economic transactions for unwanted parties in rogue states or terrorist actors or people doing narco finance stuff. There are certain transactions that the developed world just won't tolerate. I understand both sides of this argument. Of course, the idealist part of me is always going to want to embrace permissionlessness. That's something that will always be the case. But then there's also the realist part of me that knows that a lot of parties, if they get a notice from the SEC that says, "Hey, we're going to sue you," and then that party in that case, they could say, "Go ahead, we'll fight." But then when a federal court sides with the SEC, what is that party going to do? Are they going to say, "No, we're the ultimate rebels. Come arrest us for not complying"? Like they refuse. Obviously it's going to be a civil action, but then if they don't comply with the orders of the court, I mean, it's like at that point things change. I mean, the ultimate end case, if the SEC tells you, hey, we think you're violating our regs, and then a federal court says, hey, you're violating the regs, you need to stop now, and then you don't comply, I mean, there's pretty much no no end to that timeline that turns out good for the party that's in non-compliance. So it's like the realist part of me knows that there's going to be, for a blockchain that's going to survive the mainstreaming of crypto, there's going to be some part of that has to comply with KYC and anti-money laundering regulations. Like there's going to be some way to do KYC. So there's a lot of details here. I mean, does this exist at the base layer? Are we just talking about side chains and L2s? Like where should this take place? Those are questions we're going to have to hash out in crypto. I think there will be some type of integration with the traditional world. If there's going to be integration with the traditional world, there's going to have to be some kind of KYC. But at the same time, does that mean we should lose permissionlessness of the base layer? I don't know. This is one of the toughest questions in crypto, and it's always been there ever since the advent of Bitcoin. It's been obvious. There was no KYC in Bitcoin at the base layer. There still isn't really today, nor with any of the other large cap cryptocurrencies. It's not really a thing that we have KYC in crypto. We're also not integrated with the traditional world, and those two things can't sort of coexist. It's very difficult to imagine a world where we are integrated with the traditional world, where the mainstream has come into crypto, and yet we still don't have any KYC, where there's no protection against the kinds of money laundering that the developed world wants to prevent. So these are all some details we're going to have to hash out, but I don't know that we're going to be able to maintain a complete lack of KYC and be able to mainstream be able to integrate the world. I don't know that we're going to be able to go mainstream and still have zero KYC. I think we've got to integrate KYC in some way. Where it should be, that's a difficult question we've got to hash out here. But I don't think it needs to tear us apart because it's something the entire crypto space has got to deal with. I think Charles has been smart. He's making contingency plans. Previously, when we talked about this, I described it as a contingency plan on a contingency plan, a plan B on a plan B. He's saying, hey, if the regulators come along and say, you need to KYC people who are staking, Charles has got a plan for that. Is anybody saying we should do that ASAP before we're required to? No. Is anybody saying everything should be KYC'd in the blockchain? I don't think so. But it's important for us to have a contingency plan so that if we're required to do that, we can still be that last man standing. I'm not saying we should sacrifice everything to be the last man standing, but I'm saying priority number one has got to be survival. If we die, if all of crypto dies because we're unwilling to integrate the traditional world in any way, then we still lose. You could argue we die with our principles, but I think we've got to find some way to still be that last person standing and also be okay with where we land on this permissionless thing. And by the way, I've seen a bunch of US SPOs, stake pool operators, saying they would just offshore. They would just move their stake pool to, and then they just name some random foreign jurisdiction because it sounds cool, or maybe it is actually a great place to put a stake pool. Here's the problem. That's been tried in crypto before. Just ask Arthur Hayes about it. Arthur Hayes had an Asian-based entity. He was in Asia, and federal regulators decided they didn't like what his entity was doing, and so they just ordered him to report to the FBI field office in Hawaii because it was the closest one to Asia. That was their solution. Oh, you're an American and you've offshored your business, but you're still selling something, you're still transacting in some way with Americans. We don't care. If you're an American, we're just going to order you to report to the closest FBI field office because we don't care. If you're an American, they still consider you to be under their jurisdiction, even if all of your business activities are taking place somewhere else. If you're doing any business with Americans, they're going to go ahead and just order you to report to some federal office somewhere. They don't care. They don't care if you move your business to another hemisphere, another continent. If you're doing any business at all with Americans, they're just going to say, oh, you're a U.S. citizen? Okay, go ahead and report to blank office because we don't care. The only way this would work is if you hermetically sealed yourself off from all Americans and you weren't doing anything whatsoever that touches America. You weren't based in America. No U.S. citizens were delegating to your pool, but that brings us back to the permissionlessness thing. Because if it's permissionless, there's no way you could prevent Americans from delegating to your pool. So I don't think it's as simple as just saying, oh, I was a U.S. stake pool. Now I'm a stake pool on the other side of the world. Because if any Americans are delegating to you, you are probably not safe. It would probably be a mistake to assume that you're safe. In any case, I hope you're having a great Valentine's Day, and I will talk to you tomorrow.